So once you start to understand that in basic economic principles of supply and demand, it's like Bitcoin is the asset. So for me, Bitcoin was my first asset that I used to build my wealth, right? And then from there, I started to say, all right, what am I gonna do? And then when I did a couple deals, an $18 million deal, a $30 million deal, then I said, all right, now I'm gonna buy the real estate. So I had two separate assets that were both appreciating at the same time.
So what's interesting to me is they both... All right, guys, bang, bang. We have a very, very special treat for you. We have a celebrity in the house today. We have Nile Lundgren. He is the star of Netflix's new show, Owning Manhattan, and he is one of the top luxury real estate agents in the entire world. He has sold billions of dollars of real estate, and he is here to explain why luxury real estate and Bitcoin are very similar assets. We talk about scarcity. We talk about the impossibility of building a decentralized computer network and building skyscrapers into the sky. We talk about the psychology of why people may buy either asset. He's a huge Bitcoiner, and he just so happens to be incredibly successful at his day job as a luxury real estate agent. And so I'm really excited for you all to listen to this conversation. Trust me, get all the way to the end. There's tons of fun. There's tons of insights, and I think that you really enjoy it. Here is my conversation with Nile Lundgren. All right, guys, bang, bang. We're here with Nile. I thought a great place to start this conversation, which many people will not make the connection. You are one of the top luxury real estate agents in the entire country. You and I met because you messaged me and you were like, hey, man, do you want to come see the penthouse at Central Park Tower?
Yep.
And I was like, this guy is insane. I'm not going to buy that. So I don't want to waste this time. I want to be, respectful. So he didn't just come look at it. And as we were walking through there, you and I started talking, and it was very obvious that there are connections between luxury real estate and Bitcoin.
Absolutely.
And maybe we can kind of just unpack that for a second, because I think that your portfolio, many other people's portfolio, Bitcoin and real estate benefit from a lot of the same things in terms of price appreciation or depreciation.
Absolutely.
And so, how do you think about these? On one hand, luxury real estate is kind of an old world asset.
Yep.
Bitcoin, which I know you're super into, is a new world asset. So what's up?
No, I first off, thank you for responding to me on Twitter and actually coming through and seeing the penthouse. That was amazing. It was really nice getting to know you and Paulina.
Anyone who wants to buy the penthouse at Central Park Tower, call him.
Please, we're still looking here, but would really appreciate it. But Bitcoin, in my opinion, is a really great asset because there's an easy way to entry. There's a little barrier to entry. If you have $10, you could start buying it. Right. And when I first started getting into investing, roughly 2016, 2017, I'm a real estate broker and I really wanted to buy real estate. How can I be an effective real estate agent if I don't own real estate? So I was really trying to figure out how I was going to, what my path was to being able to do that. I felt that that was a very important thing as a luxury real estate broker. And then I stumbled upon this asset through a friend of mine who was like, hey, you got to check this Bitcoin thing out. I think it was about $9,000 at the time. So I started just DCAing, buying $100, $200 here on a weekly basis. And I realized as we went through the first bull run, or one of the first bull runs, 2017, 2018, that it was an asset that can appreciate and the barrier to entry was very low. And I didn't really know too much about the stock market, nor did I really want to get too involved in it. I do have a money manager. I work with Morgan Stanley right now. So I do have stocks, but my main basket is in real estate and then Bitcoin. And what I felt by being a Bitcoin holder, and I've really never sold. I haven't sold. I've been DCAing for almost 7 or 8 years now. And it's been a stomach wrenching process. But I now understand the fundamentals of Bitcoin, the scarcity, the 21 million, the amount of Bitcoin that are even lost forever. And then all of the individual people that hold it. And then all of the Bitcoin that's held off the exchanges in cold storage. So once you start to understand that in basic economic principles of supply and demand, it's like Bitcoin is the asset. So for me, Bitcoin was my first asset that I used to build my wealth, right? And then from there, I started to say, all right, what am I going to do? And then when I did a couple deals, an $18 million deal, a $30 million deal, then I said, all right, now I'm going to buy the real estate. So I had two separate assets that were both appreciating at the same time.
So what's interesting to me is they both benefit from scarcity.
Absolutely.
Right? And also they both benefit from the debasement of the dollar.
Yeah.
And the scarcity component, I mean, you're on this show, Owning Manhattan. Yep. Excellent show. You are the star of the show. Ryan, I know everyone wants to talk about, but I think actually you're the star.
Thank you.
He'll probably laugh at that. I think that you guys on multiple occasions talk about there's only one of these, right? There's only, so many units left in this building. Like this idea of scarcity driving people to make decisions. And you even talk at times about the disconnection between the money and the emotion.
Oh yeah.
And so maybe walk us through, like, why are people buying these luxury real estate, kind of units? The penthouse at Central Park Tower is like $200 million penthouse. But there's been multiple transactions just here in Manhattan where people have bought, $150 million apartments, which seems insane in terms of dollar amounts.
Right.
Is it just like, I want to brag to my friends, or what are they doing?
I think there's a brand new asset class that is being built up right now. Real estate is the traditional asset class. That's how America gets it's the American dream, right? Okay, I'm going to buy this and hopefully one day it'll appreciate and I'll go from there. But the secondary part of real estate is this new asset class of $100 million or more. Right? So the lower penthouse at Central Park Tower just traded 3 weeks ago for $115 million. Jeff Bezos is on a buying spree down in Miami on Indian Creek, buying up everything from 70, 80, $90 million one by one. So over time, if you look at those assets, if you're buying in prime location, right? You don't want to overspend for something where you're not at. But if you have a prime location, there will always be demand for that. Similar to Bitcoin. There's always going to be demand when you have so much that you can buy. So when it gets more and more scarce, when Bezos buys more and more and more of those properties, there's less and less and less out there. So when we see the S&P 500 has nearly doubled since COVID times, what are people doing with all of that money? Well, they have to put it somewhere. You can't just keep it in the bank because the government is printing money ruthlessly, and that dollars that's sitting in the bank is going down dramatically. So you have two choices. You can invest in the S&P 500, which is very, very difficult right now because even today we're at an all-time high, right? So why would you put your money there? Right? Then you say, well, real estate, all these billionaires are buying it and they want to buy more. So if you own that, eventually, maybe someone will want to buy yours, or you just hold on to it, because when you're in an inflationary period like we are right now, you buy real estate because the real estate inflates with the inflationary period when they're money printing. Similar to Bitcoin, where we're literally just printing money, and the dollars that are sitting in a bank are not going to work. So you have to buy an alternative asset. So that's why I like Bitcoin and real estate, because Bitcoin is my short-term buy where I'm just collecting a little bit, my sats. I'm just buying my sats, a little bit of sats. All we talk about is sats. So I just pull all those sats in, and then I sit there and I say, okay, where else are we going to go with this? So I own 3 different investment properties now, and all of them have done really well because I bought in the 2020, 2021 range. So I got rates that are less than 3%. So more than 60% of America has rates that are below 5%. So I think when you look at it that way, we're in a bit of a stalemate on the general real estate market, where normal people, everyday Americans are trying to buy a home. The median home price is about $400,000. That represents a 5.5% increase from the year before, which is outrageous. Americans can't afford homes, which is a problem. And I think Bitcoin solves that, because if you look at the price of Bitcoin comparatively to housing goes down compared to, because how many, the guy that bought the pizza for, 10,000 Bitcoin, I mean, that guy's shooting himself right now. Same thing, right? If you bought a house a couple years ago, it might have been 1,000 Bitcoin. Now it's 6. Right? And what's it going to be in 2 years? What's it going to be after the next cycle? What's it going to be in 2020 or 2030, for example? So I think there's a lot to talk about between the two. And I think Bitcoin is one of my favorite hedges against inflation. And I also like real estate as a hedge against inflation. The issue just for the average American right now is that the interest rates are so high. I was on Fox News last week. I was really urging Jerome Powell to cut the rates because, we're in a gridlocked scenario for the housing market. New York is a little bit different of a market, I would say, because co-ops generally are 75% of the market and they dominate the sales market. You have to put down 50%, 25% in those types of assets. And when you put such money down, when the prices kind of go down, normally people have to sell. But in New York, they're just so equity heavy that they're like, oh, I'll just wait on it. And most of the people here can wait, and they will wait. They don't want to trade up to a 7 or 8 or 9% mortgage at the current time. So it's a bit fixed in New York.
Now, Bitcoin, you can put theoretically unlimited amount of money to work
Yeah.
right? If you have enough time and you start to acquire these assets, you could go put $1 billion. You could go put whatever. If you said to me, is there $1 billion real estate in America? I think that Trump would argue Mar-a-Lago is worth $1 billion.
Yeah, right.
Judge says worth 18. Truth is probably somewhere in between.
Right, exactly.
18 million or $1 billion. There are a couple of homes in Palm Beach, one in particular that I'm aware of, where the family that owns it probably thinks it's worth $1 billion. And maybe there's 2 or 3 other homes, kind of around the world that people would say, hey, it's worth a lot of money and it's increasing because of the debasement of the dollar. And
exactly.
All this stuff. But it'd be really hard to go put $1 billion into luxury real estate.
Yeah.
Maybe Ken Griffin is trying.
I was about to say, Ken's the guy who's doing it.
He's trying.
He's really doing it.
If I remember correctly, he bought here in New York City $250 million.
$238 million. He bought 3 floors at 220 Central Park South.
So when somebody does that, how much of the luxury real estate purchase is for resilience and like the storage of wealth? Meaning they're not so worried about, is this going to appreciate, as much as I don't want to lose the economic value I'm putting into this property.
Right.
And there's a parallel in Bitcoin where some people are buying it because like number goes up and I want more fiat dollars in the future. And others are saying, I don't care if this goes up or not. I just don't want to lose economic purchasing power to inflation.
Right.
And so I'm looking more for like a store of value. What is the luxury real estate market? Are they looking for appreciation or are they looking more for protection from inflation?
I think it's a mix of both.
Okay.
I think they have downs. When you have a lot of money, you want to have downside protection. And then all the smart money that I've been seeing, and especially with some of the guys that I work with, they're buying real estate and they've been buying real estate. I have one client who put $100 million into real estate. I sold him a $34 million property down in Miami. And this is a very unique strategy. He bought it. And what he did was he got a loan. So he bought it in cash, took a loan out at like 3% because he recognized that we're going to be moving into an inflationary period with higher interest rates. And now he has an assignable mortgage at a 3% rate. So that's the key, the assignable mortgage. So now what he's able to do is command a much higher premium if he wants to sell, because he could just give that person a 3% loan. So it's very interesting how it's being played out, but there is a huge appetite considering how much money has been made post-COVID for real estate. And I think that Bitcoin as well is something that I'm hearing more and more and more in the conversations, not just separately, but also can I buy this piece of real estate with Bitcoin? Interesting. I'm seeing yesterday it happened.
And that's because somebody has a lot of Bitcoin and they just want to go and buy the real estate. Is that because there's some other reason driving that? Like, why do they want to spend Bitcoin to do that?
Today's episode is brought to you by Meanwhile. Meanwhile is the world's first licensed and regulated life insurance company built for the Bitcoin economy. Operating on the Bitcoin standard, they do everything in Bitcoin. You pay in Bitcoin. They pay claims to your family in Bitcoin. You take out policy loans entirely in Bitcoin when you need liquidity. Meanwhile, Bitcoin life insurance has redefined what it means to hodl. Protect your family from life's uncertainty in a broken financial system. Build intergenerational Bitcoin wealth while the cost of living skyrockets in dollar terms. Get all the tax and legal benefits of life insurance now in Bitcoin. They are actively binding policies today. Whether you are a long-term Bitcoiner or are just considering it for the first time, a Bitcoin whole life policy could make sense for your wealth plan. Visit their website, meanwhile.bm, to join the waitlist and to learn more about the world's first Bitcoin life insurer. Again, that's meanwhile.bm. Go check them out today.
That's a good question. So the gentleman I was with yesterday, he proposed just handing a USB drive. So I think there's some tax implications to something like that. I think that overall, if you've made a lot of money, this gentleman has been buying heavily, and he's a multimillionaire already, probably a centimillionaire. And he showed me his portfolio yesterday, and it was alarming. And his average cost basis was $15,000. So he's like, I'm sitting on so much cash. If I'm going to take it off the exchanges and go through the whole situation of, going through the IRS and doing that, that's one thing. You could definitely do that. Or you could just say, can we strike a deal and just kind of give you a ledger? So I think it's very interesting, and there's some clearinghouses, there's some title companies that are now allowing for the exchange of crypto. For example, there's a project that we're working on, I'm selling down in Miami, which is the Mercedes-Benz Places. They will accept cryptocurrency. What they do is you would wire the crypto or send it however you send it, and to a title company, and then the title company then exchanges it immediately to USD, and usually that's about a 5 to 7% fee to do that. And people who don't want to spend the taxes, maybe that's something that they want to do.
Mm-hmm. And so New York and Miami both seem to be red hot over the last 2 or 3 years on luxury real estate, which is interesting because interest rates have gone up a lot. And so why is it that luxury real estate still seems to be pretty strong, even though maybe, kind of your average single family home across America, there is that gridlock. There is, much less interest here. Is it just most of these buyers are kind of cash buyers? Yeah,
I would say, for example, I have a number of different properties in my portfolio. One of them is a brand new condominium called the Huxley. That's 71 condos that I represent. We've sold 95% of them. We have like 4 or 5 left. That is a $1.5 million price point and below. So when we saw the increase in the interest rates, total nightmare, total disaster at the property, because they're really pinching every penny to get into that studio or 1-bedroom apartment. Now, conversely, I just made a deal on a $9 million apartment on 5th Avenue on the Upper East Side. That was an all cash. And literally, so there's two worlds where it's like people are really struggling to get the rates and to pinch the pennies and save every dollar that they can so that they can have the ability to go through the bank process and get the loan. Right? That's also a problem, going through the whole bank process to get the loan. Bitcoin, you just buy it, right? So they have to go through that whole process to get the loan. And then you have these other side, which is the luxury market. And the luxury market is dominated with cash buyers. I haven't done a deal above $4 million in the last 2 years that wasn't all cash or non-contingent, all cash, and then they buy it and then they can, get their own loan afterwards. But it's all cash north of $4 million, that what I've seen. And who are these people normally? Like when people think of the Bitcoin buyer, they're thinking of a young person, usually digitally native, maybe a former gold bug who's, opened their eyes, right? But there's an archetype, which isn't actually representative of the full Bitcoin market, but I think people kind of have this general view of they skew in a certain direction. We look at content analytics and like 90+% of every one of our platforms is male. Wild. And we've been like, should we try to do different things? But like maybe that's just the market, right? What is it in luxury real estate? Is there kind of an archetype? Like somebody who has $9 million to make an all cash purchase probably has done something right in their life, right? Or won the ovarian lottery. So one of the two. But how do you think about like, are they real or are they not? Can they actually, buy this thing? Are they somebody we want to deal with? Right. No, I mean, that's a really good question. I think money talks. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I deal with people that I don't like to deal with, but if they have the funds, then I will take them seriously, whether they pull the trigger or not. That's going to be on them, but I'll take them very seriously in that situation. The people that I would say who are buying are either very successful. For example, folks, I met a gentleman the other day. He had like something in healthcare technology during COVID, and the guy made $100 million, right? So that's like literally just got lucky. He's like, I got lucky. It happened. Now I'm looking for luxury real estate. That's one type. And then the other type I would say is, well, there's maybe 3 types if you consider the Bitcoin aspect of it, but generational money. Generation, you have to think about it. The baby boomers are passing down so much wealth right now that I think people are overlooking that. And I think that's going to have a big impact on the Bitcoin marketplace, because when those baby boomers, those folks end up passing, they're going to leave tons of money to this next generation. And those people have been watching this podcast and they understand that the dollars in the bank aren't going anywhere. And I think the new generation is really going to usher it in, helped with the fact that Larry Fink and all the other people down on Wall Street really enjoy Bitcoin at this time. I mean, we're going to have an ETH ETF coming up very soon, and the Bitcoin ETF has been amazing for Bitcoin. The inflows are wild, and I never really even expected that. I've just been a Bitcoin maximalist my whole, since 2017, my whole career. And then all of a sudden I'm like, holy shit, if Larry Fink thinks this and they're putting, it doesn't matter what happens, he just keeps buying. So, I mean, for me, that has got to be one of the biggest green flags that I can ever say about any asset.
Mm-hmm. Now, the person who made $100 million through the healthcare thing, how much do they spend on the luxury real estate? If you make $100 million, I'm sure you got to pay some taxes and stuff.
Sure.
But are they looking for a $5 million apartment or like a
good question?
I got $50 million in the bank. Like, let's just blow it all on.
Yeah.
What's the best thing I can get for $50 million these days?
Right. Some people are like that. Don't get me wrong. This guy in particular, his budget was relatively reasonable considering, but it was about an $18 million budget. And he's just one of those guys that had made the money and he wants to get in something that's very unique. So that goes to another point, just about talking about scarcity. What he was looking at was like a one-of-one property with a view of Central Park, and nobody can really emulate that. The zoning restrictions don't allow for anything to be built in that area. So what he likes is the scarcity of that. This is the only condo on Fifth Avenue in this area that has these views. So he also understands the scarcity asset. Now, I didn't talk to him per se about Bitcoin, but that plays right along the same thesis of, hey, this is a scarce asset. So when you have a scarce asset and you have the funds to buy it, if you wait, especially in an inflationary period where they're printing fiat, you're going to win long term. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what they're trying to do, is diversify. And I think stock market's the first place that people go, but then we're at these all-time highs. So it's like, if you want to right now, and I just spoke to my financial advisor before I walked in just to hear what he had to say. He's like, yeah, we might want to start trimming right now because it's getting very high, and trim out of some of the heavy weighted, stocks in the S&P 500 and then DCA into, for example, IBIT or Bitwise. Mm-hmm. And that's very interesting because Morgan Stanley, for example, they're not supposed to be soliciting it, but I've been telling my manager, hey, this is what I want. I want to be invested in these ETFs because I believe in this asset. And I've actually educated my financial advisor on that, which is like, and I've been talking to him about it for 2 years. And now he's like, wait, I actually believe in what you're saying, and let's do it together. So he's waiting and we buy it. It's funny. It's like, I can't believe, I'm like, really? How am I telling you this?
Yeah.
But ahead of the curve, I think that's really important.
And as somebody enters the Bitcoin market, they can go on an exchange, and they press the buy button, done.
Super easy.
No paperwork, no negotiating, no dealing with the other side's emotion. It's an order book. If there's liquidity, you're getting your Bitcoin or whatever.
Absolutely.
Luxury real estate is very different.
Yeah.
And one of the things that when I watched Owning Manhattan that I took away was, you all as the luxury real estate agent serve not only as a pseudo accountant in terms of like, hey, here's what we think this is worth, here's what your budget is, what some of the numbers and math behind it, but also a little bit like a psychologist, because buyers like, I don't know. And there's a couple of times in the show where people show up and they have like a $5 million budget, and next thing you know, they're buying a $20 million unit. And so talk a little bit about maybe like the kind of more qualitative stuff, right? Like, how do you handle when a buyer is getting cold feet or is pressing ahead and you're like, actually, I don't think that there's anything on the market right now that you want, and if you buy this, you may have kind of buyer's remorse, or how do you just deal with some of those intricacies?
So it's case by case. Every single person who you deal with is going to be different. So one of the things that I pride myself on is really listening. If I'm showing somebody properties, I've seen 1,000 properties. I've been doing this for 16 years. I'm not too interested in what the place looks like when I walk in. I'm interested in what your face looks like, right? Are you excited about it? And then I can play off of that. I think emotions are one of the biggest things that are played into real estate. I mean, people have egos. Everybody thinks that their property is 100% the best. But there's one thing that I learned being a real estate agent early on, was that buyers are liars. So just because you have a $5 million budget, that doesn't mean that's actually the case. So Manhattan specifically is a very different market than I would say the rest of the world. If someone tells you they have a $5 million budget, I might show you 5 million, but I want to show you 6.5 just so you're educated, another 8 just so you're educated, a 4, and then maybe a 12. And you'd be surprised. I've done deals like that on the 12, and you saw Jessica Taylor do that in the show, where she had a buyer who had a budget 8 to 10 million, and then she ended up doing a $20 million deal with them. That happens all the time. all the time in New York. It's a very
they just fall
wild.
in love with the uniqueness or the asset itself.
Absolutely. You know, whenever you walk into a property with somebody and it speaks to them, you could tell, right? And when you see and you're showing somebody exactly what they want within their budget and it never works, you have to like think on your feet a little bit. And that's what a luxury real estate agent does. Is I've seen all the product. I know all the inventory. I know all the new developments. I also know all of the shadow inventory in the new developments. That means not just the stuff that's on the market, but also like the inventory that they haven't put on the market yet. So having somebody like filter through that and digest that and then help walk you through your own discovery process, I would say is one of the most important things that real estate agents can do. I don't really pitch buyer's remorse. I don't really pitch, oh, you're going to regret it later. It's going to be their decision. My job is to simply put all the options out in front of them, weigh pros and then cons, and then they're going to make their decision. And if it doesn't go out the right way, well, they learn that lesson. And when we hit the next one, they know exactly what to do.
When somebody buys Bitcoin, it's their Bitcoin,
Yep.
right?
Well, on the exchanges.
Well, meaning at least they have a legal claim to it. If they leave it on exchange,
Right,
theirs,
right,
they take it off.
right,
But it's theirs, and they may be buying it for different reasons, but it's theirs. When people buy luxury real estate, sometimes they're buying it because it's their primary home. Sometimes they're buying it because it may be their vacation home.
Right.
How does the kind of process or the decision-making change, whether it's somebody's primary home versus, oh, this is the fifth home that I'm buying that's, $50 million. Do they want to see it more, less?
Right.
Do they care as much? I'm fascinated by when Bezos buys the fifth house.
Right.
How much different is that process than when he bought the house he lived in for 20 years?
Right. Well, I think what Jeff is doing down in South Florida is he's compiling an assemblage. And assemblages in real estate are how you make properties more valuable. So he's buying one lot next to the next lot, next to the next lot, with the hope of eventually he's going to knock it all down and build a mega compound, which, if you ask me, that will be worth north of $1 billion on Indian Creek when he's completed.
When he's doing that, and let's say that you're 3 houses down from the first one he buys, and he buys the one 2 houses down, and he buys the one next door, do you just like call your accountant and lawyer and you're like, put a 0 on the end because he needs this?
Exactly.
And it's literally there's only one buyer for this. And he's going to pay whatever I tell him to.
Right. That's exactly it. Absolutely.
So what is the most expensive one he's bought so far in that? Do we know?
It's about $100 million. He's built like 3 or 4 of them though. Like a 70, a 94, a 104, 78. So he's had a number of marquee purchases. But I have very close contacts to some other developers who did the same thing down in the Sunset Islands. And I mean, the value that you can unlock is tremendous. And remember,
by putting them together.
And by putting them together. And also there's a very important factor to it. It has to be one of the prime marquee views. So looking over Biscayne Bay where you get the sunsets, that's very important. So it's like, talk about scarcity. It's like, yeah, you could be on one of the islands, but if you're facing east into a canal, into another property, there's not much of a view. But if you have the water in front of you, that commands an almost double premium.
Mm-hmm. And for those that don't know, Indian Creek is so exclusive that I think almost every house on the property or on the island is owned by a billionaire.
Yep.
And they have their own police force.
Yes.
Which when I first heard that, I said, that's cute. They have some security that probably drives around in a little car.
Yeah.
And they have uniforms. No, they have like boats and planes.
Boats, yeah.
And like it's pretty legit security that they're putting up there.
That's what you need. If you're going to buy an asset like that, you can't just pick it up on random island. You have to have people literally monitoring the waters that you're in, because they can just pull up and just get off the boat and roll up on your property. So to have that, I think that's really important.
One of the other things that I'm fascinated by is Bitcoin was something that was previously thought impossible.
Right.
Build a decentralized, computer that was the strongest computer in the world, create this digital decentralized currency.
Sure.
There was, 40 years of R&D. People tried to do this and they all failed. And eventually we get Bitcoin. When you and I went to Central Park Tower, other than Polina being excited to see the highest residence in the world and take pictures for Instagram, one of the things that struck me was maybe even 50 years ago, this would have been previously thought impossible.
Oh, yeah.
If I remember correctly, that specific unit is 1,400 feet in the air.
Yep.
When you were in the unit, you pointed out, not to scare me, but it did, that you're actually higher than the helicopters fly in New York City.
Yep.
And so how high can these buildings go? Like, will they be able to build one to 2,000 feet? Is it just going to continue to be bigger, higher, more luxurious? Like is that just the trend here for the next couple decades?
Today's episode is brought to you by CrossFi. CrossFi is the Apple Pay for crypto. For the first time in history, anyone with a Web3 wallet like MetaMask can spend crypto through a physical or virtual Visa card anywhere in the world where Visa is accepted. No more exchanges or middlemen. Just link your wallet, get your card, and start spending today. CrossFi card transactions have already been successfully processed in New York, Los Angeles, London, Dubai, China, Japan, and over 20 other countries. Be one of the first to get your hands on a CrossFi card and a prize pool of up to $3 million by joining and participating in their testnet today. You can go to xfi.foundation/users. Again, that's xfi.foundation/users. Go check it out today.
That's a great question. I think that's always the mission in real estate, is to build higher and bigger. In New York, you're limited by a lot of constraints. I've had some of the top luxury agents from Dubai come and look at the penthouse at Central Park Tower. They get goosebumps. So like, yeah, we've been in the Burj Khalifa. We could build 10 Burj Khalifas in the desert. Like, how the hell do you figure this out with all these buildings in Manhattan? And as I was talking to you about Bezos picking up the assemblage, Gary Barnett, who's the developer, he's the assemblage king. What he does is he buys one asset next to the next asset and then buys all these assets and then works out a deal with this guy through a third party who doesn't know it's him, right? So he's very good at it. And then what he does is he knocks everything down and then he builds up. So where we stand right now, there's 157, which is a building that he built directly in at the base of Central Park. Then there's Central Park Tower. Right in front of that is 220, and then 111 West 57th Street. But beyond that, from those buildings, all of the air rights in that area have been bought. Yeah, there might be some super talls that go in downtown, but to have something on Central Park, I don't think that's ever going to be replicated. They had to buy all the other air rights, and there will literally be nothing else around. So it's a scarcity play. And Gary Barnett, I think, with his assemblage moves, he started buying in 2000 for that property. So this is a 20-year play, $3 billion. And you remember, when you buy those, you have to carry the costs of those. You have to rent them out. You have to keep them going so that you're not, paying for them. And Gary was able to do that. And that's a very impressive thing. And based on what I see, there's really not going to be anything, especially at that height. There can be other super talls, 50, 60, 70 floors. That's going to be the standard here in New York. But, over 100, that's very rare air, if you want to say.
That's a good pun. 129 is the floor for that
129,
one, right?
130, and 131.
So maybe the craziest part about it was not that it's 129, 130, 131 stories up. There's an outdoor area.
Wild. How crazy is that?
And so that's the 131st floor. There's this outdoor area, which is the highest outdoor area in all of North America, probably?
The highest residential terrace in the world.
In the world,
yeah.
Okay. So we went there. I don't really like looking down 1,400 feet because
right.
You're kind of like, that's like really far.
Right.
But just the engineering feat to build something like that, again, to build Bitcoin, nearly impossible. To build this seems impossible.
Right.
And I also think that there's this element of you get to meet a lot of really interesting people. You message me, I go, and I see we become friends. And I'm like, man, that was like a unique experience.
Yeah.
Who's like the craziest person you can talk about that you've met? Doesn't have to be for that specific unit. It could be any of them.
Okay.
And like, why is it so memorable or a crazy experience?
That is a really, really good one. So we deal with a lot of celebrities. We deal with a lot of business executives. I like the business executives because they're very direct and they know what they want. They're like, I want this. And I'm like, I can't, based on what you're telling me, we can't pull it off. Like, I'll tell them straight up, but like, yeah, I'll educate you on it. I like dealing with those guys because for the most part, they're super tough, but they're direct. And if you could nail it, they'll buy it like that. The guy that I was talking about yesterday, he wasn't even going to tell his wife that he was going to buy it. I showed him a $50 million apartment. And he's like, I don't know. I have so much crypto. If this guy will accept crypto, like I might not even tell my wife, like I'll just buy it. This place is sick. I was like, wait, what? So, but he's a business executive. He knows what he wants. He sees it. It fit his aesthetic. And he's like, I want it. And I like that. I like the people that are very certain about what they want, because that makes it a little bit easier for me. It's challenging at the beginning because you have to really get your bearings, understand what they want, where they want it, how they want it. But if you could put all that together and then couch them and then maybe show them something that's double their budget, they're probably going to buy.
Mm-hmm. Is that the strategy?
Yeah.
All right. You guys have this Netflix show.
Yeah.
It's been filming for 2 years now?
Yeah.
To do it. One of my takeaways from the show is not only the real estate is obviously amazing and cool to watch. You guys are good at like actors, although it's not really acting. Like it's entertaining.
Right.
It's engaging. There's many real estate shows on Netflix, and frankly, my wife and I like to watch them because we just like to look at the real estate. It's kind of cool, see around the world,
Absolutely.
different cities, whatever. But I think we actually enjoyed the like human aspect of this one.
Right.
What was the filming process like, or what was that whole experience of just like, we're going to film this and I hope it goes, on Netflix?
Right. And so I just saw it like everyone else did when it was released globally. So I was watching it with like sweaty palms because I filmed so many scenes and you don't know what's going to actually happen. Mm-hmm. I'll just bring it back to when it first started. We interviewed with everybody, with Peacock, Hulu, Netflix. We did the whole casting for that. Then we had to go through a whole year of just doing the pilots. And then once we were approved and Netflix really picked it up, then we started getting filmed for real. Now they use some stuff from the pilots in the show. But one of the things that Ryan Serhant does that I thought was super important was I'm not an actor, right? I'm a real estate guy. Yeah, can I act a little bit? I guess. But it's an improv situation. This is all improv. So what Ryan did is with the whole cast, before we actually started shooting, we went to improv classes where we would go and we'd spend 1, 2, 3 hours as a group. And we would really get vulnerable. We would be crying. We would be jumping up and down. We would be screaming at each other. But it's all to say, like, if you do this, then I can do this. No one's shutting the door. It's not, no, it's yes and. And how do you do that? So by utilizing that time in the improv, it made it so much easier when we were actually in the moment, because it's not interesting if I'm like, hey, nice suit. And you're like, oh, thanks, right? There's got to be some pizzazz to it, like, oh, nice suit. And you're like, oh, great suit. You have an American flag pin? So do I. And I'm like, no way. How did you get that pin? And then there's like a conversation that's a little bit deeper. And I would say not every show has that. I don't think they're really going into like the deeper levels. And I think Ryan was really smart in having the whole cast do an improv class before and multiple classes leading up to it so that we were prepared and engaged to actually make best use of everyone's time, including the producers, the audio people, the camera guys who are holding the camera. Like, I try and go in there, one take, get it out. And if, I act a little crazy, whatever, that's part of it because I want to make a show, right? But I'm not trying to be bland. And I think the cast did a really good job at that. And I think that's why it reads really well on Netflix right now.
I thought it was excellent.
Thank you.
Very impressed. What's the things you've learned from Ryan?
Oh, man. Well, working closely with Ryan has probably changed my career. I was a very, very solid agent. I was all about cold calling. I was all about direct outreach and hunting people down. But Ryan takes everything to the next level. He's like, you have to be following up with people until you die or they die. And, normally I would get into it 9, 10 times. I'm like, all right, maybe not. But what Ryan has taught me is if you just keep following up with whoever it might be, that's where the real gold is going to be, because people are in different time schedules. You might be in Italy. I might be here. So you're not responding right now. But just the friendly ping, hey, just checking in. And by doing that consistently, I started doing that really hard in January because filming stopped. And then I was like, all right, I got to start picking up business here, right? So I just started really hammering everybody that I've been in touch with. And you'd be surprised. If you keep doing it, eventually, pressure busts pipes and it works. So I'd say from Ryan, that was the most important thing. And I did it before, but really like all the way till one of you die. And that's how you really get in there.
Where this goes from here, obviously having a Netflix show, super helpful, for a business where 100%. Being known, et cetera. Would you rather have the buyer or the seller that you're representing? Like, it's very interesting to me, like having the seller, like being the seller's agent feels like people got to come to you.
Yeah.
But you got to do a lot of, marketing and kind of get people out there. Buyer, you got somebody, you're on the hunt, but they don't necessarily have to buy.
Right.
And so which do you prefer?
I prefer signing an exclusive agreement, listing it, and selling it. I think that's the most important thing that you could do as a real estate agent because you're controlling the product and the inventory. If you control inventory, you control the market. But if you look at the buyer, not saying I don't like buyers, and I love going out and doing the hunt thing because I'm very good at it. I've been doing it for a very long time, and it's served me very well. But if you're gonna, if I'm gonna have to go one or the other, I would definitely say it is. What was I saying? One or the other.
Seller.
Oh yeah, it was a seller. So if I had to go one or the other, it was definitely the seller.
All right. When you watch the show, is there anything where you were like, oh, come on, they should have cut that out? Or you were like embarrassed by, or just like you couldn't believe they put it in?
To be honest with you, I've come to terms with it, right? And I was on another reality TV show before. It was called Camp Getaway. It was on Bravo. I was a camp counselor, by the way, partying with adult campers, which was totally hilarious. If you look it up, I have hair. It's a whole thing. But I remember trying so hard to be perfect on that show. And the first scene of me is me picking my wedgie. And I was just like, oh my God, I was so dialed in for like 6 months and I made sure that I didn't do anything wrong. And they just picked that moment. So when this show came out,
the cameraman's like, got him.
Yep, exactly. So when this show came out, I was like, yeah, I got to have peace with that because I know that's what's going to happen. I would say, losing a pitch on TV certainly doesn't feel good, but I give Chloe a lot of hats off for her work on the pitch. I also use the pitch as a bit of a platform to tell the world about me, which I think was a little aggressive. I think I said I was a cutthroat killer. I don't know where that came from, but I probably should have toned back just a little bit. So that was a moment where I would say I felt a little embarrassed in my hands. If you're asking my girl, she was holding my hand the whole time, and she's like, "Your hands were really sweaty during that one."
For those that don't know, in the show, Ryan Serhant has a listing. He brings you and another agent in,
Yep.
and you guys basically have like a pitch off,
Yep.
right, to the developer.
Yep.
He ends up choosing the other agent, and I love the part you said, yeah, I thought about it for like an hour, and then I just went back to work.
Exactly.
Which is like a great kind of resilient mindset to just move on.
That's 100% my mindset with everything. It's like you're going to suffer a lot of losses, especially working in a commission-based industry. You're going to suffer losses living in New York City. That's the whole game, is how many times can you get back up? So it was pretty devastating for an hour. And I let myself have it. I called a couple people on my team who knew about the pitch. I said, this is what just happened. And everyone was like, no way, really? And I said, I'm just going to give myself another 25 minutes and then we're going to move on and we're going to sell more real estate. So that's how I approach business and that's how I approach life. I'm not going to win every one and I'm okay with that. And I just put my best foot forward.
For those that are looking at luxury real estate, what are the things maybe that you notice or you suggest to buyers that they should be paying attention to that they may not otherwise look at?
I would say light and air, especially if you're looking about it in New York City. Where does the sun rise? Where does the sun set? That can command a premium. Is there a building across the street that's going to be built? Is there a vacant lot across the street? Because in New York, it's not always guaranteed that the view that you have is going to be there forever. So we investigate across the street what this project is. Is this building rent stabilized? If it is, unlikely that they're going to kick all the rent stabilized people out so they could knock the building down and build up. All right, that makes me feel better. So I'm always looking for light in air because I've sold properties when I was younger and not really aware. And then there's a building up in front of it. And then they call me, they're like, yeah, there's construction here. And if I had known, 10 years ago when I was doing it, but now I really spend the time to do that because you don't want to spend $10 million plus on an asset and then have the view or have you being disturbed by, the construction. You don't want to do that.
So light and air. Huge ones.
Especially, and that's just not New York. Also, when it comes to, like, for example, South Florida, having the west-facing view from the Sunset Islands or from Indian Creek where you're looking over Biscayne Bay at Miami, that is very, very coveted. You're looking east, it's the water. So you get the sunrise and then, there's nothing really left for the rest of the day. So, really looking at where the sun is, it helps in understanding what level of a trophy asset it is. Because you can get something that's double than what something else is on that same island just based on the exposures.
Now, I said you're one of the top luxury real estate agents in the world. You said you want to be the seller's agent.
Yes.
There's a lot of people who are when interest rates come down, they're like, you know what, I'm gonna try to sell my house. What is one or two things that they can do in their home to increase the odds that they're able to sell it? Or is there staging? Is there a nice candle that always works that's like your lucky candle? What do you do to increase the odds?
That's a really good question. So I do have a cologne. It's Le Labo. It's another 13, and it's my scent, but I spray it on the door. So when you walk in, you just get a nice little, you're like, oh, this is really nice. You get a nice fragrance. So that's number one. And then number two, it's definitely going to be staging. Most people think that their house is great, and I'm sure it is, but declutter, number one. You have to get everything out of there and neutralize the home. All these pictures of you and your family and this, it's all great, but when you have somebody walking into your space to purchase it, they need to envision themselves there. So you declutter, you get all that information or all those pictures and everything out, and then you want to find, for example, like this room, it's all white, right? If I'm going to come in and stage this, I'll put a wallpaper there, like a red and yellow or something that really pops, so that when you have like your first lead photo, there's like an interesting texture or color to get people to then say, oh, wow, that's really interesting. If everything is white, bland, they're not really going to be interested in it. So I stage it to have one photo or two photos that are like really going to pop out, and that really creates the demand.
I love that. Where can we send people to find you on the internet if they're like to sell luxury real estate? You know, there's a lot of people, probably multi-billionaires on here that are watching that have tons of real estate they want to sell.
Absolutely.
And then also, you know, obviously my audience is incredibly intelligent and wealthy and good looking, and they smell good and everything else. So they probably want to buy.
Absolutely.
Where can we send them to find you?
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. So I'm at Nile Lundgren on all channels, whether it's X, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, at Nile Lundgren. NileLundgren.com is my website, and my team's website is LundgrenTeam.com. So you can find me in all those places.
And you have a podcast?
I do have a podcast.
All right, where's that?
It's called The Broker That Never Sleeps. It's on Spotify, YouTube. I've been posting directly to X as well. And YouTube's, you know, obviously a very big one because I'm doing video like you're doing here.
Yeah. Well, I just did it because, you know, your face has got to be on here. Thank you so much for coming to do this.
I appreciate it.
People really enjoy it. We'll do it again in the future.
Yeah. Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate it.